forced in portrait mode again, portrait mode again, because YouTube is lame as hell. And once you preset up the live stream from your phone, you have to go with the default, which is portrait instead of landscape. So you're stuck with me lengthwise here instead of horizontal. Très bizarre, but whatever. That's YouTube's gonna die on that hill. So whatever, right? But I hope y'all are doing well. Let me see a thumbs up there if you can see me and hear me, por favor. Mucho gracias. And let me just make sure and confirm that we're actually live here before I go on babbling off. Okay, hey, what's up, Nelson Torres? Hola. All right, Sean Brucker, the Roach Double Deuces. All right, so I guess that is all good signs. Let me see some way more thumbs than that if y'all can see and hear me. Do we not have sound? That is the question. Let me know if y'all can hear me, because so it is 5x5, Okay. Because I'm actually not getting any sound on my end here. So yeah, as long as y'all can hear me, that's all that matters. I don't have to hear myself. What the hell would I need to hear myself for? I can hear me plenty, right? I don't need a microphone set up for that, now do I? Hell no. Yeah, cool. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. All right, so yeah, man, let's talk about the transpocalypse, because honestly, excuse me, I think it's a pretty big part of Revelation, man. And you know, a lot of people tend to think that this is something that's unique to like these recent generations, which it's definitely not. I would argue that this like dovetails into generational satanic ritual abuse type things. It goes back to the castratos and the whole opera thing, right? Where it appears that these certain families, these worshipers of Beelzebub, you know, the ones that you know, worship the whole Luciferian system thing or whatever, they've been into transgendering their children for a long time. Like, this has been going on for generations. So it's not something that's just like new, that's just been like a fad for the recent generations. And, you know, personally, if somebody feels like they're the wrong gender, trapped in the wrong body, you know, and they're an adult, to each his own. Like, I don't necessarily have anything against that. But what I do have something against is this predictive programming beast system getting into the minds of little children, subconsciously and subliminally convincing. Convincing children that they are misgendered, right? So, like, again, if you're an adult and you feel like you're, you know, like a man trapped in a woman's body or a woman trapped in a man's body, I mean, that's a terrible dilemma to be in, I would imagine. So, you know, you can't blame someone for how they feel, but if it's one of these situations where, you know, your thoughts are not exactly your own all the time, and these are like supplanted thoughts from they, you know, whoever they are, sitting on top of this hierarchy, and that's what it comes down to, is the whole externalization of the hierarchy. So if you're not familiar with that terminology, externalization of the hierarchy is basically something that Luciferians, which they used to have to operate like in the closet or like behind closed doors in secret. So like, and it wasn't that long ago where Satanism and Luciferianism was frowned upon, more than frowned upon. But in the last, I'd say 100 years at the most, they have been putting their practices out more into the open to where average everyday people are emulating and, you know, aping their satanic and Luciferian practices. And when little kids start getting confused on purpose, like by design, by this beast system, and sort of subliminally programmed into gender dysphoria, I do have a problem with that. And, you know, it's rampant, let's face it. Like, a lot of you guys are familiar with like Mr. E or Transpocalypse Now. There was a lot of really great channels on YouTube that have sort of, they've had to go other places because of the whole purge thing. And so, you know, I'm not gonna, this is definitely not gonna be one of those things where I'm calling out names or like pointing any fingers or anything, but I am gonna express that I don't think it is by accident that we see this whole resurgence towards transgenderism, and not only it being publicly accepted, but almost like pushed on us through the mass media outlets, to where, I mean, let's face it, transgender people are like what, less than 1% of the population, right? It's not like they're a big majority of people that are transgender, right? But to hear, you know, the mass media tell it, it's like half of everybody's a tranny, right? Which is this, so that's definitely not the case. It's definitely a minority of people that are transgendered or want to be transgendered. And I think that they should have as much rights as the next person. But at the same time, if this behavior isn't their natural state and it's actually been programmed into them through the media, because like, I mean, let's look at what does this do? And this has been going on since like Lucille Ball, right? As far as I'm concerned, I Love Lucy's a pretty obvious, blatant one. Testosterone and estrogen have been synthesized since the early 1920s and 30s, I believe. And before then, you know, it's not like you have to have something synthesized to get like actual hormones and like testosterone and stuff like that. But it's been going on a long time. This is definitely it's a satanic anti-human practice. It's intended, I believe, to basically decimate the nuclear family. And really, as human beings, the family is all we got, man, right? Like, people don't much look after each other except for family, and that's pretty much going by the wayside in our current generation, isn't it? But I do see it as an affront, an attack on the nuclear family. And of course, they don't attack you with bombs, and they don't whip you with whips, and they don't chain you with physical chains. They psychologically attack the family to where they don't have to use physical violence. They've basically decimated or are in the process of decimating the nuclear family with all sorts of avenues. Like, it's become socially unacceptable for like a family to exist as it kind of obviously should, right? And I'm not saying that like the woman should be at home taking care of kids and the man should be working, but I believe somebody should be at home taking care of the kids and somebody should be working. But the whole society has been geared towards like it takes two people working full-time jobs to keep a house and raise a family. And it didn't used to be like that not that long ago. So unless you're independently wealthy, it's gotten to the point where the families, the parents are out of the house working to make ends meet. The children are more often raised by the TV and by like babysitters and things like that, latchkey kids, to where the nuclear family isn't as strong like it used to be, and it's by design. But the transpocalypse thing is a very insidious, almost like a thermonuclear attack on the family, because it really strikes at the core. It separates us from the creator. I mean, let's face it, not just human life, but all life depends on sexual procreation. It's the natural order of things. And when the mass media is drilling it into people's heads that it should be celebrated, to mutilate yourself and to change genders, even before you're old enough to like drink legally in many cases, to me, that's a slippery slope. And, again, I think people should be free to choose whatever they want to choose to do with their body and with their self. But, by that token, where does it end, right? I mean, because I grew up in a United States where pot, marijuana was very, very illegal and would get you sent to prison for a long time under the wrong circumstances. But simply possessing or smoking pot would get you in, and still in many states will get you in deep shit with the state and with the law. And that there's no victim in that crime. So like the question I have is, so why is this whole transgender self-mutilation thing acceptable when, an adult can't choose to smoke pot legally, right? So it does raise some questions like, because the state don't give a crap about you, right? The government doesn't give a crap about us. They certainly don't give a crap about trannies or their rights. So what angle are they playing here? And, I would say that the angle that they're playing is very deliberate. Like and there's not just this avenue, but through many avenues, it's an anti-human campaign. I mean, if anything couldn't be classified as like demonic, that certainly should be like that sort of thing. Anti-human, attacks against the family, confusing children's sexuality. I mean, adolescence is a confusing enough time, but now, like, I wouldn't want to grow up this day and age. And it's not like I'm really that old. Like, it is kind of amazing to me how much the sort of politically correct view on this one topic has changed. But again, it goes back to the externalization of the hierarchy thing, in my opinion, because these sickos, in my opinion, these multi-generational satanic families that are typically of wealth, have been doing this sort of thing to their children for a long time, transgendering them. And as crazy as that sounds, like, look into it, because, like, look at Victoria's Secrets, full of trannies. The supermodel industry is full of trannies. The music industry, the movie business, all of these big mass media industries, and even on the social media sites, for sure, it's full of secret transgenders. And be that as it may, like, whether that's here nor there, I could really care less. But when people are being deceived and men are subconsciously lusting after men, and women are subconsciously given like body shame issues because they don't look like the lumber, the slab of lumber supermodels. I mean, it creates a lot of psychological, sociological issues on a culture-wide scale. And in my opinion, it's a big problem. It's a big part of this great deception that doesn't just begin and end with flat Earth, right? That's just a big part of it. But not only is this an affront or an attack against the family unit and against the natural order of things, but it's also, of course, an attack against the Creator, against the Most High God. There's a very clear and obvious natural order to things. And when you start self-mutilating and gender swapping, that is definitely against the natural order of things. And you could say it's an anti-Christian concept or an anti-Semitic concept, or you could just say it's an anti-human concept, the whole push towards normalizing and conditioning our children towards transgenderism. I think it's very bizarre and very scary how far that it's come in just the last few years. But it makes you wonder, is there going to be an AI connection to this? So like one day in the future, especially if like Elon Musk has his druthers, there's going to come a time when we have artificially intelligent, humanoid, cyborg robots walking around like they took our jobs, right? So like you're going to have cybertronic people walking around doing the, jobs like working at Taco Bell, probably driving the trucks, sweeping up the hair at the salons, all that. I mean, sooner or later, that's bound to happen, right? And it wouldn't be a big surprise to me because these people do plan out 50 and 100 years in advance. But it wouldn't be a big surprise to me if they were doing all of this transgender legislation in order to basically legally do away with the concept of human beings, right? Because if you do away with the concept of males and females, really it's not that big of a stretch to just do away with the concept of human beings altogether. They already have basically made corporations, people, and money free speech. What's to stop them from basically making these hypothetical cyborgs that are bound to crop up in the future, making them sort of de facto human beings with the same rights as you and me? I mean, it's not that big of a stretch. And it just seems to me that by nixing the differentiation between, like, even on your ID, male, female, X, right? That's already an option in certain states, I believe. And if not, it's definitely coming. Like, there's people pushing for this. Because again, there has to be some kind of a motivation, because these people are not like out looking for the best interests of anybody, certainly not transgender. So they have an angle, right? And I'm just curious, like, I wonder what y'all think, what that angle is. And me personally, I feel like it may be something towards, like, pushing towards, AI, like cyborg AI having equal, if not more, rights than you and I, which could end up looking something like, maybe not necessarily trying AI for murder, but giving AI cyborgs the ability to make life and death decisions either on the battlefield or in the law enforcement applications against human beings, because again, the robots are human beings too, right? Like, I could see them going that direction with this sort of thing. And it would take this sort of totalitarian tiptoe towards that, because they don't just make big sweeping changes overnight to where everybody's like up in arms. No, they take incremental little steps towards their ultimate goal. And what's so strange about it is, like, their goals often span 50 and 100 years. And, it is bizarre to me, isn't it? Because, human beings, most normal people, maybe have a 5-year plan or like a 10-year plan. Most people don't really have a 20 or a 50-year plan. I mean, maybe very hypothetical plans for the future, but for the real culture-wide, like, society-changing plans over 100 years, Like, who does that? And, you know, I always revert back to the scripture where it says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, the rulers of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And I know it's become sort of a cliche, right? But I mean, it does appear that that's what we're up against. And when you look at things like the Baphomet, which is, you know, the satanic emblem that they worship at or whatever, it is a hermaphrodite. You know, it's got male and female sexual reproductive parts. And it appears that this multi-generational satanic families strive towards that. And so when we see big name brand secret transgenders, and I won't name any names, like say the Hilton hotel chain or something like that, these people are victims. You can't really be mad at them for being victims to something like that. If it's true, you know, in my opinion, it is. But these people are victims. And by extension, it does appear that we as the public that are subjected to this mass media predictive programming and transification of normalcy of transification, we're victims of it as well, if that makes any sense. But really, you know, the family unit, the nuclear human family is our greatest strength. And they've been chipping away at that for a long time, like about 100 and some years at least, right? So, I mean, there was a time not that long ago when women couldn't vote and couldn't legally work and pay taxes. That was before my time, but not that long ago. And we've come very far. I think women should definitely be able to work and vote and pay taxes if they wish. But I disagree with the notion that our society is better for creating a situation where in order to survive, a family has to be out of the house working all the time in order to make ends meet. Like, I see that as it's a big problem. And it wasn't created by accident. Like, this is all very specific. It's all very deliberate. And there's so many interconnecting parts of this. It is very complicated. Like, I mean, it spans everything from the Federal Reserve scam, which played a big part in devaluing our currency so that it takes two people working to make ends meet. But they also passed legislation to get women voting and to get women paying taxes, which is really what they wanted. They wanted women paying taxes, which they weren't really doing before the civil rights movement. But at the same time, it really did a good job of shattering the nuclear family. And I'm not a bigot. Like, I'm all for, you know, stay-at-home dad or stay-at-home mom, but I just believe that our society would be a whole hell of a lot better if, you know, we were in a situation where a parent, doesn't matter which, maybe preferably the mother, would be home with the kids, right? Like, that would make a lot of sense. And that's the way that shit was since we were running around in caves, if we ever were actually running around in caves or whatever. But, you know, it just makes sense, doesn't it? At least it does to me. And what do I know? I'm a cisgender male and I'm whatever. But, you know, it boils down to human sovereignty. And yes, I believe that everybody should be able to make decisions for their life. But I also believe that people have been heavily, heavily deceived by this world. Subconsciously, systematically deceived into gender dysphoria, body dysphoria, forced into like this neurotic state where money's the most important thing in everyone's lives, and you'd be stupid to think otherwise. And, you know, maybe that's oversimplifying things, but that's basically where we're at. let's see here. I'm just looking through y'all's comments because I know I saw some good ones and y'all are pretty active. So let's see. Mark Coots says it's been going on since the Roman times. Check the history. Yeah, it's definitely been going on a long time. But I also think it was done in the closet and frowned upon, and like maybe theatrically for sure. Like you've got the, you know, in theater you would have opposite sex dressing up like opposite sex for acting roles. And, you know, the ancient Greeks get a lot of bad press about that sort of thing, I believe. But I don't know, that's also debatable as well. But yeah, it's nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun for sure. But what I'm saying is new is the mass media outlets, namely the television programming, getting into our heads at a young age, convincing children that of just bizarre, confusing our sexual orientation at a young age. I mean, and I think that is really like the meat of it. That's what I have a big problem against, is that manipulation of our subconscious, which they do expertly, I believe. And it really screws people up in the head. It does. Tasha Teeling says, I'm trans and my parents are big time occultists. Years of psychological torture and certainly played a role. Really? I'm sorry to hear that. I'm kind of the, well, not the opposite, but so my dad is trans, okay? He wasn't like that when I was a kid. And growing up, you know, he was a man. But then when I was in my 20s, he was basically transitioning, and he even tried to hide it from me in my 20s, but not for long. And it was it's a fucked up thing to deal with. You know, I love my dad, but he's also, well, he's like like borderline schizophrenic. He's got problems, and the whole thing is just very bizarre to me. And I've seen a side of it that most people don't see. Like, again, you know, to each his own. I think everybody deserves to live the life that they want to live. But at the same time, I also think that everybody's been hella deceived about a lot of things, starting with our very place in the universe, right? So like when we're convinced that Earth is just a little speck of dust flying around in space and there's not really any meaning or purpose to it, it's all very random, chaotic. God is kind of doesn't really jive. That this idea of a creator in infinite space doesn't really jive. The ancient goat herders of the Fertile Crescent seem kind of silly because they thought the Earth was flat, and so, you know, the modern secularist doesn't put a whole lot of weight into biblical scripture because of those reasons, and I can relate to that firsthand. But people are very deceived, and so when you couple that, Tasha Teeling, with sexual abuse, yeah, that definitely has a lot to do with it. And I'm sorry to hear that you went through that. I really am. V. Thomas says, hating on trans leaves me uncomfortable, as does hating on flat earthers. No, and I don't hate on trans. I feel sorry for them, especially the ones that are victims and were forced into it as kids. Because if you look at the castrato, so what the castratos are, it's like alto, soprano, tenor, like it's a voice singer thing, opera thing or whatever. The castratos were prepubescent boys that they would castrate and basically give testosterone blockers to where their body wouldn't go through puberty the same. And so they would have basically the lungs of a man, but the voice box of a little kid. And so the castratos weren't necessarily transgender, they were like eunuchs, right? But they did that specifically for the entertainment of the rich to make them, because what it does is it makes them have a unique voice set where they can hit basically a much wider range of scales and hold notes a lot longer, and it's a unique sound of the voice. But to force a child into that at a young age, that is very bizarre, and whoever would do that to a kid is fucked up, right? That's crazy. But nowadays the same thing is still going on, but they hide it. So, and I'm just going to name a random name here. It doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about, but look at people like Dolly Parton or Crystal Gale, and you have good modern example candidates for exactly what we're talking about, but not really, in my opinion. But it still goes on, is what I'm saying. And anybody that would force that on another human and then enact legislation and enact cultural manipulation in order to make that sort of thing normal and even subconsciously lead people down that road is very, it's insidious, man. Like, again, I'm all for free will, but how free will is that? It's not free will at all. V. Thomas says, pray the space agency away. Yeah. Stephen Landry says, you've heard less than 1% of Americans are trans. Yeah, it's something like that, something like 1%, which is like, it's really something, and maybe we should do a poll or something. But what is their angle? Like, where are they trying to go with all of this recent hoopla and cultural programming and manipulation in the mass media towards this transgender agenda? Like, I really am curious, like, where are they trying to go with it? And it may be very well something like going down the lines of cyborgs, artificial intelligence, ultimately, but what do I know? Flex Yo Face Chase says, Lucia trans, that's news to me. Yeah, man, look into it. Yeah, Lucille Ball, pretty obvious one. You have to know what to look for, but it's basic human anatomy. Like, the underlying skeletal structure of human beings is very telling. Like, there are certain things, you can't really pay attention to the hair and the makeup and even fat distribution, because hormones and different types of exercises and training can alter fat distribution on a person. So it is very deceiving, but you can't so much change the underlying skeletal structure, although they do try. So like female to male transgenders, which is a big thing, especially in Hollywood. There's a lot of FTMs in Hollywood, but they get these like eyebrow ridge implants, jaw implants, to make them look like they have more masculine skeletal structure. But even then, if you know what to look for, there are certain telltale signs that just jump out at you. And, again, to each his own. Like, if people want to be trans, people can be trans for all I care. I don't give a crap. I mean, I wish they would reconsider it and do some soul searching and really think if these thoughts are their own, right? But more power to them. What I have issue with is the elites in Hollywood and in the music industry deviously presenting as the opposite sex so as to confuse children, so as to manipulate people into thoughts that are not their own. It's the whole thing of subliminal programming. Like, that's what they do with the TV and even with music. It is a mass mind control device, which is how they've definitely gotten this world into the crappy, god-awful, shitty state that it's in today. And I know that sounds very pessimistic, but I mean, look around you, folks. the world is in bad shape. And I think inherently people are good. But again, we're not dealing just with people, like we're dealing with spiritual wickedness in high places. Get into some of these comments here. Mark Coote says there was no Jesus. Yeah, well, that's an American English name. His name was Yeshua, but he was real. What did biblical Jesus say about the eunuchs? Yeah, I don't know, probably something. But what an awful thing. And, you know, that's a good point. So prior to Yeshua, let me back up. And you hush, Noodle. Lily's starting, and I just walked her. Prior to Yeshua, it was commonplace for both Hebrew and Roman people, so it wasn't, you know, specific to any one culture, and probably to the Arabic cultures as well, if my memory serves. It was common for a rich man to have multiple wives, multiple slaves and concubines and mistresses. So it was very common for kingly types to sire dozens, if not scores or hundreds of children with hundreds of different women. And they would eunuch the dudes that were nearby or working around them to prevent them from, you know, getting a woman pregnant. So that's a pretty messed up situation. I mean, I think anybody could agree that that's not ideal. But for some reason, after Yeshua, it is now a Christian value to say that, you know, marriage is between a man and a woman. That is a uniquely Christian value. And, you know, we maybe take it for granted this day and age, but it has even seeped over into these other cultures. So it's now pretty much a world standard, at least in most of the developed world, to have marriage between a man and a woman. And we sort of take that for granted as a Christian value. But what exactly did Yeshua do to change that? I mean, you're not going to find answers to that in the KJV Bible. So that's just a question. It's food for thought. But something happened, something changed. To where women went from absolutely second-class citizens, kind of like property, almost sort of like a goat, to nowadays being more or less equal to men. And I don't mean equal to men like on the football field or something. I mean equal to men in terms of, you know, basic human rights, the ability to own property, the ability to vote, and of course pay taxes, because we want big bank, take little bank too. We all know that. Rajamak says they want genderless drones. Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Castratos were denutted. Yeah, indeed. Indeed. Mark Coote says, let's focus on teaching them the right way. Yeah, man. But Mark Coote says we need to do two teachings that reverses the teaching that our grandparents taught our parents that got taught to us. We need to reverse that and teach it to the new generations. Well, that's kind of a lot to try to do, but I guess, yeah, certain things we should definitely unlearn, I suppose. But yeah, they want genderless drones. Like Aerosmith said, eat the rich, and dude looks like a lady, right? Mike Doze says, get it straight, it's not trans agenda, it's narcissist agenda. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I mean, let's face it. There is some high up push towards this agenda. And I guess part of it is because they're just trying to make legal and socially acceptable the kind of bizarre stuff they've been doing all along behind closed doors, right? So once it's legal and socially acceptable, then yeah, they can do it out in the open. Again, it comes back to the whole externalization of the hierarchy thing that we mentioned at the very beginning. And that's what they're up to, man. But they don't do anything by accident. Like this is all very deliberate, and I just think that we should be on guard. We should be vigilant, and of course, you know, we should love and forgive each other, trans or not. And again, I see a lot of them, most of them, as victims, if not directly victims of generational satanic abuse, or victims by proxy of the mass media predictive programming campaigns that have been foisted upon us since we were all very little, starting with Spinning Ball Earth, but extending to all sorts of things, ranging from the speed of light to what is a woman, right? Which seems to be the big topic du jour that some people can't seem to answer, like what defines a woman. And in case anybody forgot, women can naturally bear children. Men cannot. So there's one big difference. I think also something that I always try to mention is the whole thing with mitochondrial DNA. As long as mother to daughter is kept, so as long as if a woman has a daughter, the mitochondrial DNA is a carbon copy. It doesn't change. So if that woman, daughter, has a daughter, same mitochondrial DNA lineage would go all the way back to the beginning person. Unless you have a generation with all boys, then that mitochondrial DNA would have been mutated. So in my opinion, I think that lineages should have been better kept, as opposed to putting so much emphasis on father to son, which is the cultural norm even today, but instead to have put more emphasis of lineage on mother to daughter, again, by the mitochondrial DNA remaining pure and intact, for whatever that's worth. I just find that very interesting because, you know, perhaps we should give a matriarchal system a chance, man. I don't know. I think the patriarchy has had a good run, but capitalism and the whole, you know, survival of the fittest, move, lead, follow, or get out of the way mentality just, you know, it's gotten us into sort of a world of shit, hasn't it? Yeah. Yeah, man. So just a few things there I wanted to talk to y'all about and get off my chest. I think I'm going to be doing another transpocalypse video soon. There's a few bits of research that I found interesting that I wanted to share with you guys that I would like to hear back from y'all in the comments about what do you think their end goal angle is with this whole externalization of the hierarchy in terms of the transpocalypse agenda. So let me see it down in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Support if you can. And I will see y'all very soon in the next one. Love y'all very much. And have a happy holiday season. Bye.